important for, okay. Being a non-anxious presence is so useful for leadership because it's what is it? Being a calm presence in the midst of things instead of running around with our hair on fire. Most people can run around with the hair on fire, but if someone is calm and steady, they can keep things running. And one word I've heard described is unflappable. So my goal here is to develop more people here who are unflappable.
Huh.
And my real life story happened 30 some years ago. It was downtown Dallas when New Arts Theater was still in downtown in the West End. And there was a gala, big fancy party. And 15 minutes after we were supposed to be lined up for dinner, the board president was almost pushed onto stage. She stood there and said, "I don't want to make this announcement, but the caterer had the wrong night." No food. But there were calm heads. The staff of the theater said, "Okay, we've got all these restaurants around as neighbors." They got on the phone, called every restaurant nearby and said, "Send over a tray of whatever you have you can spare. Anything you have extra."
I'm gonna go pull it out and pull it tight.
So we had a huge variety of,
I can get around
and
here.
we probably ate better than we might have otherwise. So that is a real life example of being a non-anxious presence. Another example of someone important would be a wedding planner. You want your wedding planner to be a non-anxious presence, right? Our facilitator today is the Reverend Julie Cecil, who as a hospital chaplain, by definition, has to be a non-anxious presence. She is also the community minister affiliated with Westside UU Church. She is passionate about pastoral care, presence, and deep listening. And as chaplain, it wouldn't surprise you that COVID-19 has shaped and expanded her ministry, meeting the needs of staff and finding creative ways to connect patients with loved ones. With these acts of presence, she was awarded the Living Mission Award from the hospital's CEO of Texas Health. In her quest to incorporate her UU values into her chaplaincy, she has also spoken out on justice issues and was recently one of 20 invited to attend the hospital system's new pilot program called RISE, which aims to elevate the diversity, equity, and inclusion in the hospital context. And in all her work, she is lovingly supported by her wife, Tracy, who together they enjoy traveling, eating good food, and hiking. And I will turn it over to Julie. Tell us about what you're going to do.
Hey there, everybody. I just want to say a huge thank you for gathering and spending time with all of us here. What a huge, lovely group of individuals you are. So we are here to spend this time together. Just some housekeeping. Make sure keep your mute on for this time. I know we had some confusion about breakout groups. We're going to have some breakout rooms later on, about 3 times during this training, so that you will have time to kind of talk with your cohort and kind of share some things that we're processing together. I do encourage you to use your chat box though, and we can kind of share some ideas and thoughts that way. And big, huge thanks to all of those who are kind of doing some technical things behind the scenes and here with us today. That is not my strong suit. So welcome to this training, when our presence needs to be non-anxious and when our self needs to differentiate. So just right up front, let me tell you that this training is not going to equip you with technical skills. I already assume that you know how to set an agenda and run a meeting. And we're not going to look at those kinds of things. More of what this time is kind of how to function more holistically. We already know that we're in chaotic times, so it's not about denying that, but about finding a non-anxious way to move forward in spite of that. So about the logistics, I already assume you have policies and procedures and protocols. This time here that we'll spend is more about how to approach change, challenge, conflict in a healthy way. So that is what the aim of this time together will be, how to approach change, challenge, and conflict in a healthy way. So before we get started, really quick, everyone can hear me, everyone can see me, we're good to go on that? Love it. So as we get started, if you have a piece of paper at the ready, it can be in the notebook that you're taking notes in, it can be just a spare white piece of paper. All we're going to do is we're going to take it and make 6 boxes. I'm a person who likes to fold. So if you're a folder, we're just going to make just 6 boxes because we are going to write some things in there. And also, full disclosure, I will send you these slides. If you're a note taker, you do not have to be super anxious about writing down every word for word on the slides. I will send that to Daniel Polk and others who can send it out to you. If you do want to write notes, that's lovely. This will be kind of a separate kind of thing for you to keep hold of, okay? So there you go. We'll start out with our 6 grid there. But before we get too far in, I wanted to light our chalice with these words. From Lao Tzu, these words, knowing others is wisdom, knowing self is enlightenment. I'll say that one more time. Knowing others is wisdom, knowing self is enlightenment. There's my chalice. Sorry about that. So we're going to talk about anxiety. So effective leaders really can't be as anxious as the people that we serve. So to lead means to have some command, some control over our own anxiety, and to have some capacity to not let the anxiety of others affect our thinking, our actions, our decisions. That's hard to do, right? Here we are in a pandemic where there are tensions and traumas and transitions galore, and all of that affects our anxiety. So this is where you enter the story. How anxiety is addressed will determine almost everything. It is truly huge. The calm presence that we bring, the behaviors that we put in place all stem from how we respond to anxiety. So just for kicks, we are going to look at the 13 biggest triggers for anxiety in a congregation system. And if you don't know Peter Steinke, he's kind of king of the field, especially in a congregation way of seeing how anxiety kind of plays a part. So let's look. What are some of the top ones? Oh, you've got money. Does that not feel right? Look at that. So many things in the congregation, anything around money is always going to stir people's anxiety. I bet you can guess some of these on this list. Next up, worship, just how things are done in the service, well, that's not how we used to do it, or that's how we do it now. Anything revolving around the actual time that we spend together, how those rituals and moments look, that can raise people's anxiety, especially when change comes, right? Any kind of sex, sexuality, things of that nature, that kind of, even congregations have had, when someone comes out transgender, queer, fluid, any kind of things like that, even those kinds of things can raise some anxiety, even amongst UU circles. Leadership style of minister, well, that's not how this person did it. You've all heard things like that, right? things like that, where we know that we're used to a certain style. And sometimes maybe leadership style is kind of code word for not my favorite, not my preference. Maybe when people say, well, their leadership style, it's possible. So that always raises anxiety. Old versus new. You can even say gray hymnal versus teal hymnal, right? Growth versus survival. Even growth can be a trigger for anxiety. Even when something is going well, that doesn't mean that anxiety is not present. Staff conflict, resignation of minister. I know that's always going to be a hot button for our congregations. Internal or external focus, when we're thinking, wait, but what about us? Versus, wait, but what about the community that we're in? All of those things. Major trauma, major transition. With pandemic, with weather, with just different things that have happened in our communities and our congregations, that's pretty huge. Any kind of harm done to a child, death of a child, even honestly, death of anyone in the congregation, but especially a young person, the congregation will definitely feel some anxiety. The gap between the real and the ideal, what's imagined, but I thought the congregation would be like this. I imagined that it would be this, and here we are with this XYZ, those kinds of things. We all know building, space, territory. If you're sharing a facility with somebody else, doing a building project, that for sure raises anxiety. One more, boundary violations. Just anytime that someone is kind of encroaching in on someone else's territory, maybe even like personal territory, we all know that that can get our blood pressure up a little bit. So some of those things may be stirring in you. So I want you to look at that list on that piece of paper that you did your lovely grid. In that first box, I just want you to write down one of those, well, more than one if you want to. You don't have to write down all 13. Really, for you, as you see it in the congregation you serve, or something that you know just in you kind of raises your own anxiety, or something that you've seen play out in the congregation. I just want you to write down the trigger and just use that space to write whatever it is that's kind of stirring in you. And it can be more than one thing. It can even be something different than is on that list. But I just want you to be mindful of kind of what you feel in the congregation already is kind of already pretty fraught with some anxiety. So here's what we know. It's not the anxiety that's the problem. Some things we should be anxious about. Some things kind of warrant that, right? But the issue is what we do with our anxiety. Are we in control of our anxiety, or is our anxiety in control of us? So anxiety impacts relationships, that's how we interact with one another. So here next, we are going to look at kind of some of our go-tos. We all have ways that when we're poked, when anxiety comes and pokes us, what do? What is our just kind of natural way of approaching those things? So here's what some people do. Some people just want immediate relief, quick fix. I don't want to think about it too hard. We just need to, well, hurry. As soon as we do this, whatever that is that we're trying to just find a quick answer for it, quick fix. Some people want to diagnose others. Well, if only they would have, well, if they only would have just done this. We all want to have maybe not just a quick fix, but almost maybe a little bit of a blame / diagnosis. Hey, there's blame, trying to shift responsibility. It's easy to do, right? To find a scapegoat for the person that brought our anxiety and raised it a little bit extra. Some just deny it, avoid it outright. If it's not real, or if it's not addressed, then maybe it's not real. Maybe that's the philosophy behind that one. And some of these, they don't have to be rational responses. More of these are just kind of that initial gut reaction response, or reaction of where we kind of go when anxiety kind of enters our world. Some form triangulation. I bet you've heard of this before. So basically, I put these two up together. Triangulation, say I'm here, I've got a problem with this person here, but heaven forbid, I don't want to actually talk to this person. This person has done something that's kind of raised my anxiety, but rather than talk to them directly, maybe I can relieve my anxiety by talking to this person, wrangling them into the situation so that I get my needs met. My anxiety gets lessened because I've given it to this person, but this person is not the person who was the issue. I've brought somebody else in and talked to them. And then I've made things worse by incorporating all these extra parts rather than just doing the healthy thing of going to that person. So all of those things in anxiety. Some just become antagonistic, a little extra sarcastic, a little extra. Some resort to secrecy. Secrecy is just never going to be a good quick fix, but it is something that some of us do in those anxious moments. And it's so easy when we are most anxious to be very cut and dry, this or that, either or. There is no room for anything in the middle. And we really lose our capacity to be imaginative, to really think outside the box. So I really like that Daniel raised that story about, what do you do when something gets canceled, when something happens? How do you see outside of this small frame, and how do you broaden the picture? Because so often in anxiety, we lose our capacity to be imaginative. And some just get super serious and disconnect. But here's the thing with that. If we are so serious, then we can't be playful with one another, and we can't really build bonds and build connections and build relationship with one another. If we're so serious and focused, then we lose that capacity to be playful. And being playful kind of opens us up to be more relational. So all of these things really play into how anxiety, what our go-to is in some of those anxious moments. So I want you in that second square, when anxiety arises. And I know it's kind of vulnerable to even talk about or think about, but when anxiety arises, what is your go-to? What is it when something happens that was out of your control, unexpected, not the thing you had planned? What is it that you know about yourself that your go-to is, that's not even irrational, not even thought out, but just your thing that you know is kind of where you tend to gravitate to when anxiety hits? Well, my friends, I think we have made it to our very first breakout room time. So what we're going to do, I know we kind of got some education about it if you were here a little bit early. Here's what I'm inviting you to do. I really, truly invite you to be vulnerable, to be open with these things. These are real anxieties that are going on in your congregation. These are real ways that you already know that you kind of approach things. Be vulnerable. And I don't want, kind of in a very Buddhist mindfulness way, don't judge it as good or bad. I just want you to notice it. I want you to just kind of notice what is without really assigning it anything. Because all of these, if you say, I tend to blame, I tend to just be very either or, I really do get kind of snarky and antagonistic. You don't have to beat yourself up for that. I really just want you to kind of notice it, notice where you go. And if you are comfortable with your group, to be vulnerable about, you know what, I noticed this in myself when anxiety has happened with my family, when anxiety has happened at work, this is where I went. I wonder if that's not something to pay attention to. And I do want you to just give everybody a chance to speak. I think you're in groups of like 6 or 8, and that will give everyone, if we have about 15 minutes to share in this time, to kind of talk about those things. And if you already know you're a personality that tends to share pretty openly, maybe hold back a little. If you know that you're one that kind of wants to hold back a little, maybe find your way forward to share. So we are going to talk about those triggers, talk about the ways that we react in anxious moments, and then we're going to come back and then we'll have some time to share together what we've learned. So breakout room number 1 coming soon.
And I'll break in here and say we've assigned you to breakout groups. And as Julie said, 6 to 8 in a group. I've done it mostly by congregation, except for 4 of you are the intook reps. And when Julie gives the go ahead, then go ahead and accept the request or to move to the group. Should be at the bottom of your screen towards the right. You'll see an icon for breakout groups at the bottom of the window. And you've already been assigned. Some of you have been there and come back because it got lonely. Any questions?
I don't see that. I'm on a tablet.
Okay.
Daniel, I'm not seeing mine either. I think it may be because I went in and I came back.
I did
Okay.
too.
I did the same thing.
Yes.
Same here.
Okay.
Yep, same here. What happened?
Okay. I don't have a lot of experience with breakout groups. Scott or
We're all suffering from premature Zoom.
Now,
okay.
and I will say this, I don't want to raise our anxiety by trying to figure out breakout rooms if it's not something. So how about we just spend that 15 minutes just to kind of talk here? And if some of y'all want to kind of share how all of this has landed on you, how you find your congregation in those anxious triggers, kind of where you find yourself in those go-to reactions. If you want to share here, we can do that.
And I'm a super sharer, so I'm standing back.
Oh.
Yeah.
I tend to be a super sharer too.
Well, if y'all need to prime the pump, you know.
Do we have some people in breakout
Rock,
rooms and
paper,
some people
scissors.
not?
I'll go ahead and go. Yeah, as to what triggers are, if plans change abruptly, that sets me off. And also when there's confusion around language, like I get very easily frustrated with, what are we talking about? You know? Yeah, those are my triggers. And I go antagonistic. Some of you know me, and I tend to disconnect as well.
So for me, because I live with PTSD and depression and anxiety having nothing to do with church, the things that happen in the church community, I tend to, my triggers will be real versus ideal, very strongly, real versus ideal. The level of engagement I see in other people, when you talk about the people who disconnect, who deny what's going on, oh goodness, I get so wired up about that. And generally, my response to I love so much, Julie, that you said, what's your first response, even if it's irrational? Thank you so much for that, because my first response is always catastrophic thoughts. Here comes the apocalypse. It's on a horse, or maybe there's 4 horses.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
bunch of horses. Here comes the apocalypse. And everyone who works with me, part of what I do in my own self-care for my treatment for the anxiety and depression, PTSD, is I have self-talk training that I do, but I have a posse. I have a go-to list of people in the church where I go to them and I say, this happened, I had this thought, tell me I want your response to my response. Not triangulating, but tell me what you're seeing in me. And these are very, obviously, these are extremely personal, these very intimate relationships, but I use that as a feedback loop. Because I'm also very cognizant of my stimulus value. I don't want to get other people upset, because stimulus value can be very powerful. And I have a lot of stimulus value. We all have stimulus value. So I pay attention to how that impacts other people. And everyone who's in the community breakout room is talking about, Jeanette, she tends to get into, she's there, they know that.
So I guess I'll go next. I really struggle with growth versus survival in the church. There's some things in the church that I see that we do that I'm like, okay, that's really more growth oriented, and we really need to stay grounded in survival. Like, for example, the name change committee. I'm like, that's great that we want to change our name, but that's really not focused on the goal of the church, which right now should be surviving. I struggle with that a lot. And that goes along with theory versus reality. And for me, I try to take a step back and, not become so anxious. And because of that, I need to step back and examine. I was like, are these my feelings, or are these feelings good for the church? So, the way I'm going to express them or how I'm feeling, are they too intense? Because I have the PTSD too. And yeah, a lot of that goes into catastrophizing. And it's like, okay, and I do the same thing. I got to touch base with somebody else and be like, okay, let's self-regulate and let's reality check with somebody else and make sure that I'm not going too far over the edge with my feelings or my thoughts. So, and that really helps to have a touchstone that is sometimes even all the way outside of the church. Hey, did I react well to this? Or is what I'm going to bring to this meeting, valid? Or is it too much or not enough sometimes? Because I struggle with that as well. So I do try to handle things directly and try not to triangulate. That's a big one, but it doesn't help when I don't know who to go to at the church to like fix things. And I feel like I'm triangulating, even though I'm just trying to find the right person to communicate with. So I guess that would be me and how I perceive and what I do with my anxiety in church things.
Yeah, we've got more time. Anybody else want to share? And thanks y'all for what you've said, really poignant stuff.
Okay, this is Sherry, UUCOC, Oak Cliff. So one thing is that when I came into this, I wasn't really focused on internal church stuff. So this is kind of off the cuff in terms of, things I'm noting down here. So what I wrote down was the growth versus survival trigger, because I feel sometimes like we are in a situation of, trying to keep our heads above water, like so many congregations, organizations, individuals in these last couple of years. And that sometimes that leads to some number of us, myself at times, others at times, just trying to hang on. It's kind of I guess it also kind of falls into the, changing things versus not changing things. It's like that creates a lot of, I think can create a lot of anxiety about, do we just keep doing what we're doing because we've done this thing and we're still here, so let's just keep doing this thing, versus, for example, digging into the widening the circle of concern report and going, keep doing all the things we've been doing may not be the way to go. So that's what I wrote down. And I think generally my go-to on it tends to be kind of a deny avoid situation. But I guess I do that sometimes by just narrowing my focus so that I'm only really staying in relationship with the people who are on the same path I'm on about it, or that I feel like, yeah, we're in agreement on this, that we need to do this thing, even though that's scary and big and different and whatever. So just kind of narrowing my focus to those folks, which is not really healthy in terms of other relationships that I have or might have within the congregation. And then when I'm not hyper focusing in that way, I deny avoid by what quote unquote spare time I have, might end up going into binge watching something completely unrelated on Netflix, because it's like, oh, I just can't bite off any more conversations about any of this. I just, go to the meetings I'm committed to going to and talk with those people in those meetings and learn what I can. And then the other hours of the week that I might be working on that harder, I'm not. So.
Yeah, y'all are raising really good things. You're right. The growth versus survival, ideal versus real, and the ways that we kind of narrow our focus or kind of look to kind of a worst case scenario. I mean, all of that is super real and valid. I hear y'all. Anybody else? I think it's getting close to when they'll bring us back, but we probably have time for one more person if anybody wants to say some things.
Just real quick, go ahead. Sorry.
A technical thing. I was waiting for the word to broadcast a message for everyone to come back.
Yeah, if y'all want to go ahead and we can start heading on back.
Before, I did figure out for those tablet users like myself, the breakout room icon is on mine on my iPad. It's top left quadrant. It's looks like a little 4 windows. It says join breakout room. I assume if I had punched there when invited to split off earlier, I'd have landed in my breakout room that was pre-assigned, but I did not. So I was here with you lovely people.
There, I think I just broadcast a message to everybody. And,
You did. It popped up above the viewing window.
okay. And now I'm going to go start visiting.
Oh, I know people can hear me. I'm just curious, where am I and where I should be? I don't Zoom.
This is You're here with me. That's all I know. I don't know.
This is why. Oh, okay. There's people. This is why I'm all like, should I leave? Should I go? Should I come back? Should I stay? I don't know.
You're good.
That's why I have my daughter here. She's like 12 and she knows way more about this than I do.
I'm for you're straight.
So she can guide me.
I've never dealt with Zoom breakout.
Yeah, so the way I have my screen, I can't tell when everyone comes back. So y'all just tell me when it's time to start talking again.
All right.
I
There's
see.
47 people total.
He's still in the other rooms chatting, so it'll be a minute. I can hear him.
Oh, okay. They are slowly joining back. We're grabbing back in.
The participant count is going up in here, so but we're still about 18 or so short of where we were to begin.
We're still waiting for community in Longview.
We don't want to make them anxious for taking too long.
No.
There's so much that could be said.
I'll share something sideways and irrelevant, but it's about the when the list of triggers was first put up, and Julie said, "You've got money. Does that not feel right?" I think she meant it one way, but I took it as having money does not feel right to me. How do I have this money? How did that happen? As opposed to you have money on the list of triggers. And yes, of course, that's a trigger for many people. It was just really weird.
That was my initial thought too.
You've got money. Does that not feel
Like,
right?
wait, what? We have money? We do?
Yeah.
In the event it ever happens, it's going to feel like science fiction.
Gnats, that doesn't feel right.
We're up to 46 people, Julie.
Say that one more time.
We're up to 46.
Okay.
We're just
Are we
waiting for Longview right now.
Okay. Well, as we wait for those to come in, does anybody want to share kind of maybe one or two thoughts from the group or kind of insights you had? Apart from me telling you had money, and obviously I totally lied to you. Apologies.
Well,
We had communications come up that a lot of folks are anxious about the unknown, but maybe not as much needed to be unknown as it was, because communications don't seem to be received when they're sent.
Yeah. Well, due to our problems with our building and the freeze and rebuilding, a lot of people have concerns over the building and also to rebuild our membership after the pandemic.
Looks like everybody's back now.
All right.
A lot of
Well, thanks for being vulnerable, for really sharing some of those things with one another, because it's true. I mean, maybe that's hard to admit. Oh, you know what? I am kind of antagonistic, or I do kind of deny or avoid, or all those things. So I really appreciate just your time to kind of be vulnerable in that space. And that's really what this paper is meant to do. It's kind of meant to just for you to write down some kind of main themes apart from any notes or anything else that you're doing, just to kind of have a touchstone of what to pay attention to. So we all know anxiety is a part of life, but what makes the difference is our response versus our reaction. So what we've just talked about is totally response-based, right? It's the thing that you can do without practice, without forethought, like something happens, that's just boom, your involuntary reflex, your go-to. So we already know how to do that. And we know that some of that is driven in some ways, maybe by fear, manipulation, anxiety, not wanting to offend or ignore, extreme thinking, you know, that kind of doomsday thinking, or just really, from one end of the extreme to the other. Passing blame, choosing sides, side conversations, targeting. We know how to do that so well. We don't need training on that. What we are here to talk about is how to do things differently, and that is called response. So not just an involuntary reaction of a reaction, not just that kind of reflex, but a response. So what would that look like? It would be handling something directly, owning those decisions, holding the course with clear expectations, boundaries, responsibility, those things where you wear your little adulting sash and you get a new badge every time that you've done the thing. So that's kind of what response is. And it is harder because it's not just our gut go-to. We have to practice. We have to really mindfully think through what we would do, how we would say it. It takes work and it takes forethought to really be able to live in a response that is a true response and not just a reaction. So I'll tell you this, when I was kind of new to this course of thinking in CPE and chaplain school, all of this was new, how to kind of engage my own emotional internal processes. Because it's so easy just to kind of navigate the world the way you've always navigated it. But a lot of time it's reactions, right? So responses, I came up with a board game that I made for myself called Moxie. And I would have little cards of like, this coworker asked me to do this thing that was really her job one more time. How do I respond? My neighbor is moving out and cleaning out his house, but now I hear my pipes of my water hose going that he's using my stuff. How do I engage that? Anything where you have to maybe have a hard conversation, where you have to handle things directly, own your own decision making, have an expectation and take responsibility, those things are harder. And some of those things we need to practice. So I really encourage you, I know we're having this time together today, but I encourage you to use your board as kind of a test lab of how you can practice together doing some of these things. You've already shared together kind of what your initial reaction is. And honestly, sometimes when we practice our responses, sometimes they don't go according to plan. Sometimes if we're really the kind, nice person who never speaks up and we finally say something, sometimes we swing that pendulum a little too far and our reaction or response is harsh. And own that. Say, you know what? I was really trying to handle things directly. I think I went too far, but let me keep working on that because I want to be able to respond in the moment the way that it needs to. So all of those things, we know how to react. It is harder work to know how to respond, and it takes time. It takes practice. It takes intentionality. And it really takes kind of owning and being vulnerable about, you know what, I'm still trying to work all this and get it right. Let me keep trying and giving yourself some grace for that. Not beating yourself up again, but just kind of noticing, okay, am I able to respond appropriately? So I want to lift that up because I think that is a real key to where we can go from here. So what do we do with all this anxiety? How do we find a way to keep all the anxiety from seeping in? That's really what the crux of all of this is. We know it's an anxious world. We know it's an anxiety-ridden congregation. We know we are carrying a lot more anxiety than maybe we ever have in the past. How do we keep it all just from crashing in on us? How do we keep some kind of a wall, some kind of a barricade around us that's a healthy way for us to hold ourselves intact without letting all the anxiety just seep and flow on in? So what that is called self-differentiation. So this is from Murray Bowen and Edwin Friedman. They kind of came up with this system, family systems theory. And while it says the word family, it is for a family, but really truly any set of people, any way that people gather these things are true. So we notice that what do self-differentiated people have? They're able to do these three things. And this kind of comes from cell biology, kind of that sense of differentiation with our cells. They kind of incorporated that into the system. But they define self based on principle. So rather than attacking or acquiescing, knowing what you side with, knowing your principles, your values, being true to who you are, being true to what you know, those kinds of things, that's what we're calling yourself. Those things when you own, like, no, I know this is true, this is right, this is me, owning that, sticking with it. So that makes it hard because it means you have to regulate and manage anxiety. So rather than letting anxiety determine behaviors, letting us be in charge of anxiety rather than anxiety be in charge of us. But then we have to stay connected, right? If we oppose each other, we're not going to be able to work together. So all of those things are true. And I can tell you this, even as a hospital chaplain, that's my area of work. This is true every day. And this is not me violating HIPAA to tell you this, because this scenario plays out every day at every hospital. But so many times people at end of life will say, I'm done, I'm tired, I'm ready. And there'll be one or two family members that say, no, mom, no, grandma, no, 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 you're not, you're good. You keep going, keep fighting, keep. That person knows what they want. So when we're in, any of us are in those situations, how true can we be to that without letting the anxiety of others come in? Because we see those kinds of things play out different ways every day. So how that anxiety affects us, how we can be true to ourselves, how we can keep our cool, noticing the anxiety, regulating it, managing it, just reflecting on it, kind of what's swirling in me, what are the anxious thoughts, but then still in spite of that, with that, because of that, whatever you want to say, how do we still stay connected with all of that going on? So there's two ways that this can kind of play out on a continuum. So here, think about kind of a seesaw. Think about here, you've got this balance of two things, ourselves on one side, others on the other. How do we balance those things? Who gets the most attention? Do we give ourselves the most attention? Do we give others the most attention? Who gets to kind of win when anxiety comes into play? I know me, raised as good, Southern, nice, female-bodied person, it was all about being nice. It was all about acquiescing to the other person. So for me, I already know I have to work on fusion. And fusion is called just coming together where you can't tell the difference between one person and the other. That's how I was raised, that you kind of acquiesce to this other person and you almost get fused together. That connectedness is almost maybe a little too strong. But the other end of that continuum is cut off. Like, nope, I'm done with you. I'm tired of you. We're done. No more. But what that does is, if you're calling this other person bad and gone, well, that just makes you're calling yourself good and wholly righteous, right? So we need to find a way to kind of find some middle ground on that balance. So here's one thing that I know. If fusion is an issue with you, it's going to be difficult for you to tell other people about difficult behaviors. It's going to be hard for you maybe to find those words to say to others when something is inappropriate. It'll just be easier to be silent and go along. If cutoff is kind of your other end of the spectrum for you, it might be easy for you to be dogmatic, opinionated, sure of your rightness. And there's somewhere in the middle that we all fall. So, oh, you know what? Did I not have you write this down? So we've got the triggers, we've got anxiety, reactions versus responses. Go back on that last slide and think about what reactions, well, we already know what reactions we have, what responses might we want to work on? How is it being direct? Is it handling something more, owning, taking responsibility, what we might want to do there? And then on this one, fusion or cutoff, where do you find yourself in that continuum? if you were to think, oh, you know what, I know myself, I probably am more of the opinionated, dogmatic, tell people what it is, and if they don't do it, they're out the door. Or I'm like, you know what, I don't want to make someone hurt their feelings, so maybe I'm more of a fusion person. Just kind of where you might think you fall more on that continuum. All right, so we've talked a lot. You have earned yourself a video if I can make it happen. Let's see. I am going to try to do things on a computer that I obviously am not the greatest at, but we're going to do our best. Okay, we push things. And Renee helped me to know how to do share sound. Thank you, Renee. And we're going to see someone come off of mute and tell me, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to start the sound and you tell me if you can hear it okay. That's a whole bunch of notes. Oh, wait.
Someone who influences a group of individuals to accomplish a
Could you hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, here we go.
Yes.
common goal, whether that goal is to design a fuel-efficient car, respond to an international military crisis, or find a new company health plan. Now, there are many different ideas out there about how to become an effective leader. Some suggest that leaders must have certain traits, such as intelligence or self-confidence, sociability, maybe even being tall. Others say it's about technique or skill that leaders can acquire. But in A Failure of Nerve, the late Edwin Friedman goes against the grain of leadership studies and suggests that effective leadership is not about traits or skills as much as it is an emotional process of regulating one's own anxiety. He refers to this process as self-differentiation, or knowing where one ends and another begins. This is a systems perspective on leadership, rooted in cell biology. Take this healthy biological cell. It has a nucleus, which controls the activity of the cell. It has these mitochondria floating around here. And it has a cell membrane, which keeps the cell separate from other cells when they hang out together to form biological tissue, like this heart. This heart cell is differentiated. It knows its purpose is to pump blood. Bum, 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 bum. Despite what these uppity brain cells may think. Bum, 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 bum. Not only are we humans made up of these cells, we function like them. We also form ourselves into groups, whether these are families, companies, or nations. Like an individual cell, a differentiated person can stay connected to others without losing his or her identity, or without taking on the emotional anxiety of the group. A differentiated leader can take a well-defined stand even when followers disagree, while remaining connected in a meaningful way with others. Now here's the deal. Some people in these organizations are poorly differentiated, and they act like viruses. Viruses do not have a nucleus or a core organizing principle, so they cannot exist on their own. Rather, they look for other poorly differentiated cells that are easy to latch onto. Well, this may look like harmless workplace gossip, but what they are doing is infecting the organization with their anxiety. They cannot handle one-on-one conflict with another person, so they attempt to rope in a third person, thinking this will lessen the anxiety. This is what Friedman calls emotional triangles. And if you are the one being roped in or triangled, it's so tempting to enmesh yourself with the drama. It's even flattering, Hey, you are being asked to help out in a situation, so this person must really trust you. But don't do it. Don't get triangled, because this only leads to getting stuck and only results in more anxiety in the system. And the infection spreads. And worse, it's bad for you. Friedman says that the chief cause of stress and burnout is not overworking like we all think, but getting stuck in other people's problems or getting triangled. But the differentiated leader is like the emotional immune system of an organization. By being a non-anxious presence, differentiated leaders resist being triangled, which influences others to take responsibility for themselves. This is very counterintuitive to those of us who are used to chronically anxious organizations. But Friedman says that differentiated leaders are able to tolerate other people's discomfort because this encourages them to take personal responsibility. In the long run, the differentiated leader's presence has the effect of diffusing the anxiety in the organization, allowing it to develop and function in a healthy way. Now, about sabotage. Some organizational systems are chronically anxious. In other words, they have a lot of people who are poorly differentiated. Such an organization will be threatened by the presence of a differentiated leader because, in a way, this upsets the way things have always been, or the homeostasis of the organization. So, the chronically anxious organization will inevitably turn on the differentiated leader. But, according to Friedman, sabotage is a sign that the leader is doing the right thing, and it's the leader's non-anxious response to such sabotage that defines the differentiated leader. This, he says, is the key to the kingdom of effective leadership. The beauty of this approach to leadership is that it applies to anyone at any leadership level, whether you are, as Friedman says, a parent or a president. Finally, differentiated leadership is not a static condition. None of us arrives completely at this place. Rather, differentiated leadership is a direction in life, a direction toward maturity. And the only way we can get moving in that direction is to take care of ourself.
All right, so let me see if I can get us back to where we were. Yay. All right. We just watched the video. So next, how about we go into a breakout room again, and we can talk about some of those things, some of those reactions versus responses, some of those things about self-differentiation, what you picked up from the video. And I encourage you to do the same thing as you did before. I invite you to be vulnerable. I think that is actually a strength. The more that we can own our own vulnerability and extend loving kindness to those who do the same, encourage vulnerability. I encourage you just to think about what kind of came to the forefront for you, what kind of rose to the top of your mind. And then if you can, just give everyone kind of a chance to share some of their insights, their thinkings, maybe kind of where they find themselves in this emotional system of anxiety versus non-anxious presence. So we will do that for about 15 minutes. It's about 11 o'clock-ish now. So how about we do some breakout rooms?
I'll go stay right here because I don't see anything else to do.
All right, we can be the unofficial breakout group that does our own thing. We can be the rogue ones. So what kind of came to the front for you? What things might you want to share about how you're feeling about all of this information, where it's hitting you?
Me and Kiddo were discussing that I've said all of these things to her just in different ways about like school and her friendship groups and how you can't get so wrapped up anxious wise in like your friend's problems. And you got to take a step back and try not to react so much, but respond. That animals react, humans respond, and we want to raise our level of consciousness. So we're not being an animal, we're being a human being and responding that way. I just thought that was so hilarious that we were having that whole conversation during this thing. I was like, so, and I told her, I was like, I couldn't explain all this to you, as you're growing up, if I hadn't already gone through, thinking about some of these things myself. And I've had to take a step back. I even left church for 6 months to, like, okay, I'm reacting and I need to figure out how to respond to this situation. And sometimes you need to take yourself out of the situation and just let it play out how it's going to. And that might be ignoring and denial a bit, but I felt like for that particular situation, it was the best thing so I'm just not even in it at all and just to see what's going to happen with that. And I don't know if that was the most mature thing to do at the time, but it seemed to help.
I think it is what it is sometimes. And I think that's okay. Kind of what we said earlier, just acknowledge it, notice it. We're not assigning it at a good or bad. But I think I like what you said, and I really appreciated what you said at the beginning that, this is across the board. It's not just for your board of, at the church. It's not just, but it's for your family. It's for your friends. It's for kids. It's for how we drive on the road, the way we approach ourselves and others. I mean, this is kind of across all the spectrum, right?
And being a nanny, that's kind of what I do is like little toddlers, all they do is react. And you're trying to teach them how to respond by using the 1, 2, 3 or the timeout method and everything is get them to settle down all that catastrophe going on in their brain because they're having a little meltdown because they didn't get goldfishes. And you're like, no, we need to stop. We need to breathe. We need to take a second and we need to actualize the situation. And, the sky isn't going to fall just because we didn't get our goldfish. It's okay.
True, regardless of age, this is the topic of human life. Yeah, who else might want to share? Thank you, Christina.
Hi, I'm Vicki Verinder, and I've found some interesting things out already. I have been in situations before where I know of other people who are triangulated, and it's food. There's a lot of things going on here that once you figure out and what's going on and what's going on, now I just stay out of those situations completely. So a lot of things that I do, if I know if I know the topic and I'm able to help people, that's a different situation. But knowing that there are good ways to solve things and there are bad ways to solve things is things that I am going to learn more about this. And the first thing that you said just caught my attention because when my mother was dying, she was had a stroke well, anyway, she went to the hospital. She was there for a week, and she was there from Monday to Saturday, and she died Saturday. And the doctors, you know, she got better during the week, and then she got worse. And my brother said when her kidney was failing, he said, I'll give her another, you know, I'll be glad to give her my kidney. And the doctor said, look, that's not going to do any good. Her body is shutting down. And he gave us the situation. He said, it's better off just to put her in hospice and let her you know, go than to try to keep her on a ventilator. And I said, there were two things my mom said. Don't bury me in a pine box. And she wanted something better than just the normal one. And don't put me on a ventilator. So we were able to spend some time with her for Saturday morning, and they were going to put her in hospice on Sunday, and she died Saturday night. So, and I am now grieving for a good friend of ours that just died yesterday morning at 1. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki, for raising all of that. And even what both of y'all have shared, I mean, from Christina talking about even, you know, how kids, you know, approach these moments of anxiety, even like preschool and goldfish, and how we want to raise them to kind of not just be about those, you know, initial reactions, but really respond. And then to talk about kind of end of life situations with those anxious reactions and how we want to respond. This is a lifelong thing. And and kind of even what you said, Christina, earlier, you know, we touch on it, but we don't really know what to call it. And so for Vicki, even for you to say, you know, I want to learn more about this. It's the stuff of life, but we don't really, I don't know, read this, study this, know this stuff, even though it's our day-to-day that we swim in. Anxious times and change and conflict, that's kind of the air we breathe, but knowing how to kind of find words for it and to know how to kind of pay attention to it, that's really important. Anybody else want to share some things?
I was going to say, I'll pop in. Triangulation, I learned that as a kid. My mother did that, and I learned from her. And so it's been long-standing habit that I've had to unlearn. But I also learned.
You're saying you learned how to triangulate? Like,
yes, I learned well, and I learned it as a way of doing it. So I learned that that's how you got along, was to triangulate, because my mother did. And I also learned from her, just put a smile on, everything will be okay. Stifle, 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 which isn't always the best thing to do. So I shared in the phrase earlier, my phrase to describe being self-differentiated is that it's when you don't bring your own baggage to the party or on the trip. You leave your own baggage behind because you're helping others. So that's my summation of not being self-differentiated. And today I've been focused more on the technical, not the content. So I'll probably will go back and watch the video later. But in fact, I think I'm going to go drop in on one of the other breakout groups. Before I leave, how much longer do you want
if
before?
you want to go ahead and tell them to start kind of a minute to wrap it up, that would be great.
Okay, I will give them broadcast a message.
And I'll keep track of who's coming back in so we know when everybody's back.
I just broadcast a message. And are we going to be doing a third group, or should I just close the rooms?
At the very end, there will be kind of a wrap up time.
Okay. Well, I'm going to drop in on another group here.
You got powers. They can just be everywhere.
I have this visual of him parachuting into the group.
I love that. Dropping in. I see some of us coming back in. For some of those who have just joined while we wait for the others, do y'all want to share any kind of insights or things that maybe you might have discussed or things that kind of rose to the forefront?
I guess one thing that came up was our church, we feel our little, that maybe we're losing people because we just have Zoom meetings. And I wonder if other people have had that issue.
Is that, you're saying that's something that's raising anxiety for the congregation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that kind of goes even back to one of those triggers, worship. That was number 2 on the list. Well, we've changed the way worship looks, the way we even sit and watch and participate and join. So I think that's true that would be an anxiety trigger.
I wonder
like
how
everyone's back.
Other folks have dealt with that.
We may have to discuss that in a different forum, but you're right. I think that is worth discussing at some point.
Okay, thank you.
We've had other folks that have joined because they are too distant from our church, but they're able to Zoom. So
it's a plus and a minus.
Yeah.
Our group talked about, a lot of us tended to identify with a cutoff, right, as a response. And so we talked about self-awareness in the moment of that cutoff, and maybe being able to, before you get to the point of total, like, I'm done, maybe there are some points where you're self-aware about the cutoff is happening, and how do you step back, take a breath, and then re-engage, kind of controlling that reaction and re-engaging and allowing yourself to participate after you've had that moment of self-realization. We also talked about a lot of the cutoff having to be around not wanting to be engaged in drama, so that when something is happening that's, people have now moved to a space of not constructive shit, or however you would say it, recognizing that and being able to re-engage when you're in the appropriate mind space.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, anybody else? Just a one quick word or so that kind of came out in the groups that y'all were a part of that you wanted to lift up?
I think recovering from COVID and how that has decimated communication across congregations and society as a whole, it will take time to rebuild that.
Yeah. I think we are totally in a world where that's going to be kind of a definer of our lives, kind of how this has shaped us, and it has left scars and bruises on all of this, just emotionally, maybe physically, but just all of our exhaustion level and the way that we engage the anxiety around us. I think this is a timely topic because I can't think of a more anxious time than now, right? So on some of these things that we talked about, that our group that I was a part of brought up, it reminded me of something that I wanted to say out loud to everybody. These are things that we did not really have to work on learning. Like, they were just kind of in the environment. It's kind of the stuff that our mom said, the stuff that, grandma passed down, these ways of kind of reacting versus responding. It's a sea we swim in, right? So many of these things, it takes really work to get our head out of these anxious waters, to even have the self reflectiveness to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And I liked how someone named how even with kids, the way that we want to help them find good choices and good ways to engage, all of that. We want people to learn how to respond, to be a little less anxious, or the way that we respond to anxiety. We want to do that in a healthy way. So we will move on from here, and I'm going to do something to my screen. There it is. And we are going to talk about what self-differentiation is. And then we're going to spend about 2 screens talking about what it is. And we'll have 2 slides talking about what it is not. So you've seen kind of self-differentiation. Let's get a little deeper into it. So what self-differentiated people can do, they can keep their goals and keep strong relationships. And it is so important that we use an I voice, that we're speaking on our behalf. You know what? When this happened, I felt hurt. I'm curious about what happened in that situation, because I noticed, or I kind of had a feeling that maybe you want to name I. The more often we can name I, the better, because you're speaking from your place. If we're talking about self-differentiation, being owning and being true to your values, your core, all of those things, well, then that has to come out of that place of I, and that's what we're speaking forward. We're living in our own space and skin without invading the space and skin of others. I don't know if y'all know the movie Dirty Dancing, a classic. There's this one scene where Patrick Swayze is kind of teaching her to dance, and he calls her spaghetti arms, and he tells her, no, that's your space, this is my space. You can't invade my space, I can't invade yours. Something like that. But it's really acknowledging that there's kind of a spot where I end, you begin, and then there's not this fusion, not this enmeshment, that we leave room, we leave space. We maintain individuality, embrace others at the same time, which is hard to kind of find that balance, right? Between us and others, where do we find that center? Resist telling others what they need, think, feel, or should do, like that Parker Palmer quote that we always go to, no fixing. I don't know how it all goes. Some of you others have it memorized as a beautiful mantra, but really, truly not telling others what they need, what they think, what they should feel, what they should do. And always from an I place rather than a you or a we. appreciate the difference in people, and really kind of even what we've said here, letting it come, letting us notice it without assigning it a good or a bad. And bullying, so much. So I have found myself in new situations, like maybe say when I go to a new job, people are kind of trying to feel you out. Who are you? What will you put up with? What will you not? And I have found it's important for me at the beginning to kind of slow things down. When someone I see is offering kind of a bullying gesture, to be like, hang on, let's wait. And just recognizing that. So first off, recognizing when maybe this is a kind of bullying, slowing that situation down, but then recognizing how to not participate in it. And then there's always just not wanting to be a rescuer of others. Self-differentiation is really about our own responsibility, claiming our own responsibility and expecting responsibility in others. So it's not so much about let me fix that for you, do that for you, help you with it. But what tools do you need to do this thing that is emotionally hard, but that you can do? So that's kind of what differentiation is. But there's more. Holding on to positions and beliefs without being defensive, being clear-headed under pressure, coping without falling apart. And that I know is so hard, especially in COVID times. Knowing how much others need and when they need it. And I really like this one, if you are on that first of that list, on that earlier list I showed you, of kind of being true to yourself, your core beliefs, if you honor that and know, you know what, I am comfortable in what I am, who I am, how I am, well, then we don't have to be so in the business of trying to win someone's approval or trying to navigate those social waters if we kind of can give ourselves that grace for who we are and acknowledging that. Then we're not trying to win approval or attack or blame or maneuver in those relationships. We're not trying to play games with people in order to feel loved or powerful. We've learned, here's kind of an interesting way that this person has said it. This is from Rod Smith's Family Systems blog. He's a good one to pay attention to. But think about any time that you as a board person or as a congregation person gotten that, well, somebody in the congregation is saying, but they don't ever have a name, just that nameless person that always pops up. If they won't claim their name, don't give them the energy. Remember we talked about earlier, not being about secrecy. This is part of that, and not playing into letting the secrecy win. So have learned that the voice of they is better ignored if they will not identify who they are. So in other words, we're just going to ignore the they if they won't or can't say who they are. So that's one of the things to focus on with self-differentiation. It's knowing where we end, where someone else starts, and it's doing those things. So we are going to use FID, little square down here. We're going to use it for two things. We're going to write down what the self-differentiation, what it is, what we think, you know what, on some of those lists that I've just seen, I get that, or maybe I need to work on that, or that's the one that kind of rose to the fore for me. And then next, we're going to look at some lists of what self-differentiation is not. And we will also use that same square. So self-differentiation is and isn't, and we'll write those in. So we've talked about kind of how it is to be differentiated. So what is it not? So it's really not even a behavior. It's that thing that happens even before the behavior. And that's why this is such an important topic, because it transcends everything, every relationship, every dynamic, because it's not about the doing of the thing, it's about the emotional process behind it, underneath it. So it involves an inward transformation that can lead to new ways of behaving. I will tell you that as a person who has studied this for the last CPE and chaplain school, this is huge. These are the things that they have us focus on. But I've become a better spouse. I'm a better driver. Like, I don't just sit there at the four-way stop and like, I don't know, is it my turn? Should I? Like, I make more decisive motions. My behavior has changed because I'm aware more of my emotional process and how that plays out as I'm in the world. So it's a realization of our uniqueness in our role, our goals, our calling with an internal eye. It's an inward process to find outward expression in every area of our life. So it's not a set of rules about how to behave differently. It's not so much a how-to, but it's more of a paying attention. It's more of a being aware. It's more of taking that time to kind of reflect, slow down, like someone said in our breakout room, you know, that kind of count to 3 kind of way to go about life, to really slow things down and take a pause and take inventory of what's going on inside of us as the anxiety is around us. So more of what it's not. It's not just trying to be different for different sake. It's not just saying all of y'all are over here. Well, I'm differentiated, so I'm going to be way out here on the other side of the circle. It's not that. It's not just about making a statement or resisting authority or trying to be defiant of cultural norms or anything else. Sometimes you may feel like you're on the outs of things, but it's not just that you are saying, I'm differentiated and putting yourself on the outs, because that's not what this is. And it's not like it's just a completed thing, like, oh, I had that hard conversation with that person. Check, differentiated. It's not that you just all of a sudden glow with differentiation. It's an ongoing daily practice, because life, anxiety is an ongoing daily practice. So it's not Lone Ranger behavior, but self-awareness, self-assuredness. But again, it might feel kind of Lone Ranger-y to others. So that, again, we're going to write in that self-differentiation is and isn't. We're going to write that in that box. So this is probably my favorite slide, just because I think this really kind of brings everything home. So what would it mean if we, yes, stayed in our thinking place, but we're aware of our emotions? We're in the meeting, we hear this thing of, oh, this person sent another email, well, we had another call, well, this person's stirring things up, well, this thing might happen, well, what if? All those things are going on. Okay, we feel our anxiety, we feel our blood pressure going up. What are we paying attention to? Are we able to kind of slow it down to be aware of the emotions that are being stirred and the emotions that are becoming pretty high? And then just knowing ourselves, what we bring, who we are, what are our expectations, what are our focus, our goals, what's kind of our personal mission apart from just the mission of the congregation that we're part of. So it's not a lack of emotion, but an owning of emotion, of feeling it, leaning into it, naming it, addressing it, just acknowledging it. And just like what we said earlier, just kind of letting it, being aware of it without assigning it a good or a bad. But in all of these moments, whatever they are for you, slowing it down, asking yourself, what just happened? I got anxious there. I got reactive. Why? What touched that nerve? What is that? What do I need to pay attention to? So I encourage you, keep a journal. And earlier, I just want to mention this. Triangulation is only a bad thing if you are not wanting to talk to this person. You are avoiding this thing. So you're going to find other ways around this thing, or trying to ask this other person to maybe fix this thing. But that is not the same thing as getting advice or feedback. Because if you have an issue with this person and you're like, you know what, I just want to check in, I'm feeling this way, but you're not wanting them to fix it, that we're not calling that triangulation. We're just calling that getting advice from beloved colleagues and friends. So I just want to own that. But however you want to kind of pay attention to what's going on in you. As a chaplain, one of the practices that they have us do, we have to write verbatims. And it truly is like verbatim, like you walk into a room, hi, I'm Julie, oh, hey. And people will say a whole conversation, you will write it out. That is good practice. if you find yourself in a situation where things feel a little more anxious, okay, write down the conversation. How did it go? Read it back. What would you change differently? After this person said this, well, you said this, what would you have said? What could you have said that would have been a more responsive approach, a practiced approach rather than a reaction? Sometimes we have to practice how we want to be in the world, and that's okay. So we have talked about all kinds of things. And next we're going to talk about, we're going to take a little break. And this is not for a breakout room. Let's just kind of catch our breath because I've said a lot of words. And let's just kind of let you, even in this big group of 50, if some people feel comfortable, even if you're maybe not the usual one who feels comfortable, whoever you are, just to kind of say, you can answer one of these questions or just how you find these things kind of landing on you. We'll kind of take a deep breath together and process together.
This is Tammy from Longview, and since there's a vacuum, I feel a need to fill the void. One thing that came up for me is one of our programs a few weeks ago, someone specific, it was Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, and one of the things he addressed was, if we are comfortable with ourselves, if we have our own identity that we feel is strong, it's easier to welcome others because then we're not threatened by them. One of the things he was talking about was immigrants, for example. So we're not threatened by them coming in and taking over if we know ourselves well and have our own strong identity.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. I think that's valid. Well, I know I'm looking at my watch and it says 11:35-ish. So I know we're kind of in the downward slope of things. So if you needed to get off around this time, you can. If you are willing to stay for about 10 more minutes, up to you, but we'll kind of start landing this plane. Does that feel okay? All right. So these next couple of slides are what we would do is kind of a healthy trait. So even in this final little square here on your paper, we're just going to kind of write down maybe some of the healthy responses that we can do. This is a nice slide, but I won't talk about a lot of it. What I will talk about is that right there in the middle. What do healthy organizations do? And even breaking that down, what do healthy people do? We speak for ourselves, we speak to others directly, and we take a position to stay the course. That really, truly is kind of the crux of everything that we're saying here today. How is it that we can say words in the moment? How is it that we can slow things down, say things directly? We're not blaming. Remember, we've already talked about all the things that we could do. We're not trying to be antagonistic. We're going to use I language. But how do we come from a healthy place to say the thing directly to the person that needs it, not the triangle person, but say, you know what, when this happened, I got the sense that it came across this way. I just wanted to clarify. How do we find ways to practice how to say anything like that? Say, I was just a little curious about this. I want to know more because how I heard it was, I heard it as doing this. I just wanted to be in good conversation with you and kind of get clarity. However, we can find ways to speak up in the moment for ourselves, for others directly. I think that's how we get our adulting badge on our sash. The more direct we can be is always going to be a healthier approach than an indirect. So let's go on to this next slide. So anxiety in the system, it has to be fed. So what happens if we don't feed it? So if we're not going to focus on all the things that the what ifs, okay, they're there. We know that everything could happen, but what if we focus on our strengths, our resources, our options? What if we came from a place of reflective calm, kind of slowed everything down, took a step back before we reacted? So, because remember, reaction is in the moment, it's immediate, it's gut punch, reflex. But if we come from a place of reflective and calm, that comes from that more practiced approach, and that's where we want to find ourselves. We want to assess the situation, find clarity, maintain purpose, vision, mission, and focus on themselves and their own behavior. Focus on mission, not consequence or weakness. Stay connected. Even if we have opposing ideas, that's okay. We still want to try to find ways to find common ground with others. So in all healthy systems, you'll find leaders who define themselves, regulate their anxiety, and stay connected with other people. This is a good 6 responses of differentiated leaders. It's everything we've talked about. How we pay attention to that emotional process, how we observe our function, how we regulate our anxiety, avoid reactivity, get clarity about our guiding principles and values. We know what's stirring, we know what's there, so that even when someone says, yeah, but I don't think we can do that, I don't think that's sustainable, I'm not sure that we can still hold true to what we've already agreed on, voted on, what we know to be true, without the anxiety of everyone else affecting that or changing that. And seeking out resources like those people we talked about. We might need advisors, we might need InTuck, you might need other people on these calls from other boards who can kind of be resources for you. But I would add a number 7 to that. And I would say, yes, that's great. Pay attention to your emotional process, pay attention to your functioning, your anxiety, your activity. But I think number 7, the unspoken, is we have to do something. We have to directly engage that thing that maybe would be easier avoided. We have to actually do the thing, right? Find that direct approach, that direct way to engage. So anxiety is always going to find its way to you, the leader, and it will feel like you are attacked or betrayed, kind of like in the video, sabotage. When that happens, it's important to realize that all of these things are going to go out the window. It's going to feel personal. I hope you can take that deep breath and realize it's not. Here's the one thing that I know: when people say things, it is more about where they are, what is going on in their world, as much or more than what they are actually giving to you. If they're talking from a place of anxiety, it's probably because they have anxious things going on. It doesn't mean it's about that even situation or about you. So as much as possible, try to take the personal out of it, because honestly, I think a lot of our interactions are a lot less personal than we believe them to be. But I think a lot of the ways that we can be aware of that is to all pay attention to our emotional process, our functioning, our anxiety, our reactivity in those moments. So I know we said final breakout room. We may not. We may just kind of have a final closing words of things that have kind of stuck with you, things that have kind of found a place in your brains, or things you want to work on, or things that really stood out to you. And we can do that here together rather than in a breakout room before we kind of close on down.
I had thought of this earlier, and something you just said reminded me of it. It's that people sometimes act like they're the center of the universe, right? Well, they are the center of the universe. It's the center, they're the center of their own universe. And the trick is remembering we're each the center of our own universe rather than the center of everybody else's universe.
It occurs to me that it might be good, at least in my congregation situation, if we had some just really brief little description of these principles. I do mean brief, that we could start meetings with, particularly like congregational meetings or board meetings, maybe not every meeting, but seems like they're just really worth remembering and reinforcing that way.
When I was
Yeah.
looking,
Help you practice those things. That would be good.
looking at that list of 6 things, or the 7, to me, if someone is strong and secure in their self-differentiation, those 6 things happen almost automatically. They're on autopilot. You don't have to stop and do that self-care. It's automatic. Sometimes it's difficult. As another real life example, I was remembering the video when Dianne Feinstein became mayor of San Francisco, and she had to announce that Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk had been assassinated. She had difficulty maintaining her composure, but that's an example of, managing her own stress, which was obvious when she had to make the public announcement.
Yeah, and that's a good word. I don't know that it's, I like what you've said, and I think there is a way of managing that anxiety, even if it does mean our tears. I think that's okay too. And I want to lift up really quick, I think Kathy's getting ready to talk, but to address what Pam said, there is a really good training on, if you were to type in UU Institute of Leadership, there are some trainings for boards, and they are fantastic. I think it's $35 for a module. I think it's called Centered Leadership, if I'm remembering right. But really good stuff that y'all could do together to kind of really find some ways to really integrate some of these things, to kind of use these as touchstones at the start of your meetings. It's a good training. They have little short videos. They have some discussion questions. It would be a nice way if you wanted to kind of keep this discussion alive, this and other things as part of your congregational leadership training. That's a good way. Just look up UU Leadership Institute and you'll see some resources. But now I'll keep letting you discuss.
I do have something to say. And that's a good segue, Leadership Training Institute. In our last breakout room, or maybe it was the one before. Anyway, we have nailed my personality on so many of these things that relate directly to ineffective leadership on my part, cultural upbringing, growing up being a people pleaser, and not even at this age having difficulty saying no. So all of that feeds it. This has all been a very personal experience this morning for me. I find myself that I agreed to a leadership position at our church that I didn't really want. I thought I could probably do it. I would love nothing more than to not be in that position. But you have given me ideas, and I will try to stick it out. And that's really not what I came on here to say. But
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability, your honesty.
well, it's a positive and a negative, and for me, in many meetings, it turns out to be the ultimate negative when I get so upset at what someone has said or done, and all I can think in my mind is, why are you such an ass? And how did you get to be in a position of leadership? But I think that really speaks to, if in an ideal world, everyone who lands in a position of leadership, whether they think that's where they want to go or not, if we can ensure some sort of training, seems like too strong a word, just even a brush with these concepts and recognizing things in yourself. And I don't know, I feel both distressed and optimistic at the same time, which is pretty much a you thing, I guess. So thank you for letting me ramble. I'm working on that too.
You got it. And the more we can, I appreciate what you said. And the more that we can try to rein in, because it's so easy, right? We are trained from a young age to be like, but why are they, what's up with them? But to kind of bring it back to, okay, what's going on in me? What just stirred in me? Why did that get my attention? Why, you know? So I think the more we can do that, there's great learning there.
We can only control ourselves, definitely.
Yeah, anybody else want to share just a brief word of kind of what has kind of risen to the top of your mind on some of this time together?
Thank you for reminding us that we all have to be the change that we seek.
Well, I think that is a beautiful way to kind of close out this time, Roy. I appreciate that. So before I extinguish our chalice here, I just want to encourage you. You are leaders in an anxious time. You are here in a hard situation. You're navigating your own stuff, which is probably more heightened, more stressed than maybe you've ever felt before. And you're making it truly, maybe even better than you think you are. But I just want to applaud who you are, what you bring, how you are in this world. And just for you taking the time out of your day to do this so that you can be leaders in the congregation, leaders in your world. Thank you. Truly, that's a blessing to all of us to even just get to spend this time together and take this time for this kind of purpose. So I just want to affirm you and acknowledge you and just know what a good difference you are being in this world. I just hope that you'll find these to be helpful tools to take with you into your congregation life and to all the other areas of your life to help you make it through. So with that, I will extinguish our chalice with these words by Glennon Doyle that say, "These things will be hard, but you can do the hard things." These things will be hard, but you can do the hard things. So dear ones, I just want to offer you that blessing. And I know these conversations will continue in your board and beyond, but I think this is maybe the end of our time together. I know I went a little over, but I thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Julie.
Thank you
And
very
Daniel.
much. This has
Thank
been
you, Julie.
really
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, both of you. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Daniel. Thank you, Julie.
And thank you, Beth, for putting some of us at the table.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. We're helping grow new generations of leaders.
All right. Thanks, Julie.
Bye, friend. See you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Julie, for listening.
Thanks, and I'll see some of y'all tomorrow.
I'll see you tonight or this afternoon.
Oh, that's right. We're doing workshop.
Well, no. When we'll come by and pick up that laptop you want to give Nancy.
Okay, cool. All right.
Bye.